I'll let him take a glass of water and I'll speak to you first. Let's welcome you here. It's wonderful to see you here. It's the first time you've been here. We have a great citizen from your country come every other year. Every time she writes a novel, I call her, and Isabel Allende crosses the bridge. She is slightly on the center left, but we'll leave it at that for right now. I would like to ask you a question. I was just in Chile, in Santiago, Valparaiso, and down in the areas towards the south. My Chilean friends say the following to me. My Chilean friends are all on the left. It was Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon who sent the green light to Pinochet to launch the coup, and we Chileans deeply resent you Americans interfering in our affairs. Comment, please. You have the mic.
Well, first of all, let me say hello to all of you. I'm the Consul General of Chile in San Francisco since last September. I'm very pleased to be here at this excellent university, the USF. I think this is the second or third event that we organize here. And we have always organized very interesting activities. So thank you so much for inviting me to be here. Really, your question is very difficult and very sensitive, you know, because it depends who you ask. You will find many different answers regarding who's the person who you are asking. But I can tell you that people in Chile don't hate America. People in Chile, I would say, love America. We have excellent relations with the U.S., so I don't think that there is a resentment in Chile against the U.S. I think it is not worth to come back about 40 years ago about what happened in Chile. Chile was having a very difficult situation during 1970 to 1973. The situation there was very chaotic. I think part of the shame was because of there is an expression in tennis, but I forgot. It's the self-made mistakes. Well, what is the expression? But you know what I mean. The government did the government that we had that time did very bad things in the economic field. But at the same time, we have to recognize that there was interventions in Chile, not only from countries from the Western Hemisphere, but also countries from the Eastern Hemisphere. You may recall that at that time we were at the Cold War, and the world was divided into two blocks. So, and the superpowers of the world at that time, both used to intervene in not only in Chile but in most of the third countries. So I don't want to talk in details, but I just want to say that Chile and the U.S. have excellent relations in all the fields. We don't have problems with the U.S., so we have a very open and positive agenda to work together. I will leave there for now. Thank you.
Spoken like an ambassador or a consul general. I have a banking question for you. At my home university where I got my PhD, which is Berkeley, Berkeley has a view that the reason that Chile had its hard problems was that using the great theory from a South American academic, the theory is dependencia, that Brazil gave the world coffee and rubber, Argentina gave it some beef and some wheat, and Chile gave it copper and other minerals, and they were exploited by the general West so that they remained dependent in a dependencia state. This academic, by the way, went on to be president of Brazil. Was it in fact Anaconda and American companies like that in Chile that therefore the Chileans reacted against and therefore closed down their system for a while in order to drive out these large corporate structures that were exploiting them, or is that too simple?
Well, I asked some Australian friends of mine some time ago why the Australian government stopped a Chinese company from buying a very large Australian company. I asked my Canadian friends why they stopped a Chinese company buying potash, the big company. I asked my American friends why they stopped the Chinese buying a petroleum company in California and a port administration company in New Jersey. So what is funny in my view is that our teachers of the past, who always criticize us for not privatizing for more, etc., our teachers are now doing or trying to do or imitate the same sort of things, they taught us not to do. In terms of the banking crisis, I managed the external debt of Chile in the 80s. I was the chief debt negotiator of Chile in 1983, from 83 to 89. I did negotiation with 500 commercial banks around the world. For 7 years or 6 years, I did 2 Paris clubs in Paris. And in my view, the banking crisis of Chile, to some extent, is very similar to the banking crisis you had in this country, in Ireland, in Europe, etc. Bad management of banks, corporate governance failures, lack of supervision, weaknesses on the regulatory. So I don't see anything different between, I obviously looked at my banking crisis. It was funny, as chief debt negotiator, I had to restructure the banking debt. And then I became chairman of the Banking Association, and I have participated in that capacity in all the banking reforms of Chile over the last 20 years. So I witnessed this process on both sides, as a government officer and then as a banker, as a chairman of the Association of Banks. And today, I think we have, according to Moody's, it's not my word, according to Moody's and some of these rating agencies, we have the 3rd or 4th most solid banking systems of the world. Why? Because we learned our mistakes of the past. We reformed our supervisory role. We reformed the banking regulations. And what is more important, we did a lot of self-regulation. And we became very professionals in managing our banks on the assumption that banks never fail. If banks fail, the government intervenes, and there's normally a lot of government money. What the British were not able to do in Ireland for 500 years, 2 banks ruined Ireland in 3 years' time. And the British Empire was not able to do that in, 400 years? So that's why. And in terms of what happened in the past, again, is part of our past. We had a very protective economy. We had the idea that natural resources had to be in local hands. But all this was changed. Today we have a very open economy, not just in terms of trade, but also in terms of investment. Foreign investors are treated in Chile according to national treatment. There are no differences in treatment. Foreign investors can borrow any amount of money in the local banking sector. They can issue bonds with pension funds. They can even list themselves in the Santiago Stock Exchange. And we have seen many construction companies from Italy, Spain, etc., that because businesses there have not been very good, they have moved to Chile, and they have become very important players in road construction, etc., because we have all this infrastructure basically is now privately managed, privately financed, and the concessions, not just roads, but ports, airports, jails, and hopefully very, very soon schools, public schools. There has been a complete change of philosophy and mentality. And the same, in my view, happens in all Latin America. In this, I think politicians throughout Latin America have learned the lessons that inflation is bad, that you need to run a fiscal balance at least, if not surplus, and that the private sector has a role, that you have to open the economy, and that's the situation in Peru, that's the situation in Colombia, the Lula miracle in Brazil. I remember when Lula was elected, Brazilian bonds were trading at 70%, the real was trading at 4%, the Brazilian debt is now trading at 100%, the real is 159, and it's one of the so-called emerging economies. Say Venezuela, that unfortunately is not a good case. I think the rest of Latin America, I think the Chilean social and economic reforms, even under Pinochet, were very influential in Latin America. You know. Probably people will never recognize that because the reforms were connected with the Pinochet regime. And that's a fact, you know, whether you like it or not, that's a fact, and facts are facts, historical facts. But de facto, I remember Fujimori, I met Fujimori many times when he was first elected. He asked me about the debt equity program of Chile. I was the one responsible for the debt equity program of Chile. And some other Chilean economists were brought to Peru in terms of fiscal reform, opening of the economy, etc. And I think the same happened in Colombia and some other countries. In many of the micro reforms of Argentina, Chile was a good example in terms of deregulating the energy, deregulating the water, deregulating the banking system, etc.
I have a question for Counsel General. Since our friend has just mentioned deregulating water, we read in the newspapers that Chile has decided to do something that California has decided to do the opposite. 2 years ago, we had a group here who gave us a large look at rivers that had been dammed, and this group pointed out some of the dangers that had come to citizens and people living along the Mekong and other rivers coming out of the Himalayas. And now we are taking down some dams here in California, like on the Klamath. And then the headlines in the Chronicles say that Chile has decided to dam some of its major rivers. What is this, a problem with energy sources? If it's energy sources, do you also have nuclear energy? And are you building in that area?
Well, thank you. Again, this is a very complex question, but we are here to answer the question. Can you hear me well? Yes? Yes, Professor is referring to Hydro-Aysén, I can imagine. Hydro-Aysén is a project that is about 1,500 kilometers south of Santiago. This project has been has been evaluated during the last 5 years, I think. You know, Chile is a small country, and we are growing, as Mr. Somerville said, at a rate of 6% per year. That means that Chile double its necessities of energy every 10 years. So we need to diversify our sources of energy, and we need to incorporate every time new sources of energy. And this is a huge project that will provide about 2,500 megawatts, yes. So it is about 20% of our current production of energy. So this is a huge project. And Professor Hatcher is correct that this project has been very polemic, I would say, because environmental people or people who support the environmental issues reject this project because they think that this is going to cause damage to the landscape in the south, to the rivers, and also because there is a line that has to go from the very south to connect with what is called Sistema Interconectado Central Interconnected System, to provide the energy to the central region of Chile. So Chile needs energy, and this is a very good opportunity to provide a huge amount of energy. If we have something in abundance is water, hydroelectric power. So we need to take advantage of the resources that we have. We don't have atomic power. Since 5 years ago, since President Ricardo Lagos, we have been discussing the possibility of having nuclear power, but this is a very complicated matter because, as you know, Chile is a very seismic country. Earthquakes, yes, we had one of the strongest earthquakes on Earth last year in February 2010. So we are assessing all the possibilities, and in this regard, nuclear power is one of the possibilities, but we are just doing the assessment studies with the cooperation of many different governments, including the US government. When President Obama visited Chile last March, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the US in order to receive cooperation with regard to how to handle nuclear power, and how to do very safe nuclear power plants. But this is a very long-run project. You know, we will not have nuclear power plants from now to 15 or more years. This is very costly as well. So to summarize, I would say that we have to assess all the possibilities, and hydroelectric power is one of the sources, and of course we cannot reject this possibility. And this project was being assessed during the last 3 or 4 years, and this week, or last week, I don't remember exactly, I think it was at the beginning of this week, there was a verdict of the environmental institution saying that that project could be built, but under certain circumstances, very strict and tough rules. So that would be my answer, I'm sorry.
Let me complement that. I sit on the board of one of the 2 companies that have been advancing this project. So far, we have spent almost $300 million in studies, $300 million in study. This project will probably be one of the most efficient projects ever developed in the world in terms of the land that will be covered by water, et cetera, et cetera. We have made studies about the condition of birds, insects. Look, $300 million, that's a lot of money in studies. Unfortunately, and I think I mentioned briefly in my presentation, the environment in Chile is becoming a big problem. I think that we have not been able yet to achieve the right sort of balance between economic growth and the environment. Some people believe that we should probably have the standards of Switzerland. You know, when Switzerland had an income of $15,000, probably the environmental rules of Switzerland were not the same that exist today with $50,000. So this is an interesting subject. This is one of the, in my view, education. The question of the environment and the effect of the environment in investment projects and the question of immigration are the most immediate things that we have as Chileans to face vis-a-vis the coming years. Fortunately, last week, all these permits have been approved after 3 years, you know, $300 million. And at some point, I remember hearing that we had 3,000 or 4,000 questions about different aspects of this project. Chile has no oil, no gas, and we have to rely on hydro or coal. In a normal year, hydro accounts for 65% of electricity generation. During the last 4 years, we had droughts, and we have to rely now a lot on coal and gas. We have to import gas, and we have a degasification plants in Chile now, because we used to rely on Argentinian gas, but at some point in time, due to the lousy pricing policies of Argentina, they ran out of gas. And obviously they use that gas for domestic consumption and not export to Chile, despite the fact we had binding agreement with the Argentines that we were obviously not able to enforce. So I think there's a realization in Chile that we want to continue to grow, and we don't have oil, etc. We have to rely on what we have. The so-called non-renewable, other non-renewable, they are very expensive, you know. Wind power is very expensive. You have to subsidize it. The cost of electricity in Chile is the most expensive in Latin America because we have the right sort of pricing policies. But it's very expensive. Very expensive. And if you combine high energy cost with the value of the dollar today, it's becoming a major problem for businesses in Chile. I'm well aware of that. I mean, the business sector, I sit on a bank, I see how margins of businesses have been affected, different types of businesses that rely on the tradable part of the economy that is very important. Chile, like Hong Kong, is an economy that is totally tradable, totally tradable. If you look at imports and exports of Chile, it's like Hong Kong. So
it is certainly
a country
true
that depends on the markets and, of course, the cost of energy. There are companies now, and I'm sad to say, that are moving, some industrial companies are moving facilities to Peru because in order to remain competitive in terms of energy costs, Peru is cheaper. Labor costs are cheaper. Electricity is cheaper because they have gas, and they also subsidize gas. They don't have the right sort of pricing policy for gas. Now, this is a subject, because I sit on the board of the largest utility in Chile, we have been promoting this project, and it's a real solution for Chile to continue growing. This is it's cheap, it's renewable, it's not contaminating, but again, all these environmental aspects have really been, and I'm totally in favor of the environment, by the way. I'm not, I think, but the problem is that, in my view, we have not yet been able to achieve a fine balance between both considerations. It has become a very sensitive political potato, for lack of other problems, I guess, you know.